Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 14, The Family Plumbing. We apologize for this being delayed.
Life happened. Thank you for your patience.
With our apologies and thank yous out of the way, we're going to dive into our brief summary of the episode. The Sheffields wake up to find that the mansion has no water. Abandoning his first proposed solution, moving back to England, Maxwell relents and hires Fran's second cousin Irving, who is responsible for flushing Queens' name. Maggie tries and fails to convince Maxwell to let her attend a kissing party that evening, worried that she'll end up old and alone like Fran. Irving, accompanied by his granddaughter Tiffany, arrives to save the day. Fran warns Tiffany not to touch anything, while also instructing her to play nice with Brighton. Meanwhile, Maxwell is auditioning showgirls. After Fran also fails to convince Maxwell to let Maggie go to the party, she finds Brighton in the shower kissing Tiffany. Concerned that she's yet again up a creek without a paddle, Fran worries that Maxwell's going to fire her over Brighton and Tiffany. Instead, to use Maggie's words, Maxwell wants to throw Brighton a parade because he snagged his first kiss a year before his old man. Maggie needles Fran into pointing out Maxwell's hypocrisy. Fran then walks in on Maxwell in the shower. Fran tells Niles it was horrible, and like seeing your father naked, her mother should only be so lucky. Niles, of course, wants to be the one to tell Miss Babcock. Irving gives a guarantee that he'll be back, and Tiffany dumps Brighton. Fran then explains to Maxwell that he has to trust Maggie as much as Brighton so that Maggie can handle 14-year-old boys. That way she can handle full-grown men. During the conversation, Maxwell can't meet Fran's eyes, so she tries to reassure him that she didn't see anything, adding, "You have nothing to be embarrassed about. Believe me." Do you have anything you want to add, Bernadette?
No, I think that's pretty good. The only thing is I think Brighton beat Maxwell by 2 years.
Oh, I thought it was a year.
I have 2 years in my, but it doesn't make much a difference. The
Either
point
way,
is Brighton beat Maxwell.
Correct, because it is a race to see who can get their first kiss earliest.
Right. Apparently so.
So do you want to start talking to us about scene 1, which I believe is breakfast?
Yes, it's breakfast. But Fran is not in her robe.
No, she's not, which makes absolutely no sense this time.
Nope. Well, so we're at breakfast. Again, as you mentioned in your summary, it turns out there's no water in the house. And Maxwell makes the comment they should move back to England, which kind of made me ponder for a second whether the kids ever lived in England or not, or if he's just generally saying it to himself and like Niles, you know.
I don't think the kids ever lived in England.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking as well, but I was just like, you know, anyway.
Good point.
The problem, of course, with not having any water is, you know, he can't have his tea. So Niles does hand him a tea bag, and
what does he say?
You can suck on that.
Yep,
you can, suck on this. Anyway,
so other problems that come from not having water, which I think is where you're going, is you can't bathe, you can't shower, you can't brush your teeth, which leads Maggie to say, "I'm disgusting. I can't go out in public like this."
Yeah. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this is a recent issue, right?
Oh yeah.
Like this has not been going on for a couple of days.
No.
So part of me is like, how are you already like within a day, you know, like a couple of hours feeling like this?
Well, just think of it this way. If you woke up and you couldn't wash your face, shower, brush your teeth, like your teeth start to feel kind of filmy and kind of soft. I don't know how to describe it, but like, that's unpleasant. And of course she's a teenager. So
yeah. But it's interesting too, because I will point out that in this scene, Maxwell, you can already kind of see some scruff.
Well, that means it looks like he has high testosterone levels.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, you know, Maggie makes that comment, and then Fran comes in and she's fully dressed. And she looks so, you know, and everybody's kind of amazed that she looks so nice. You know, like they asked her, does she have water? She's like, no, but she did make her way through a lot of her moist towelettes.
Yep.
Um, and again, she's kind of in a pretty good mood too, especially compared to the rest of the household. But
Yes.
anyway, it's a Saturday, correct? And so, you know, they're bemoaning the fact that they can't find a plumber. Fran, of course, has to
Oh,
say, she
before
has a
you get
second
there,
cousin.
before you
Hmm.
get there, I particularly enjoyed the comment. I think Maxwell asks Niles, "Did you call the plumber?" And he says, "I beeped him. His yacht has gone into international waters." I enjoyed that line. But yes, so you're right. So Fran cannot help herself and points out that she has a second cousin. Go ahead.
Hmm. And of course, at first Maxwell's not too keen on this idea.
Did you catch
Um,
why? What happened with the electrician?
well, I mean, Maxwell's just getting his eyebrows back.
Exactly.
So apparently, we infer there's not been a great track record with, Fran's relatives stepping in for their various odd jobs. But eventually, Fran points out that cousin Irving, has a great reputation. Again, it wasn't called Flushing before him,
Yep.
and so eventually Maxwell relents and says, "Okay, you can hire your cousin." So I mean, that's the gist of the scene. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. That that I mean, we already covered the things I wanted to talk about with Maggie and Brighton. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned Brighton's comment. So after Maggie said, "I'm disgusting. I can't go out in public like this," he says that's never stopped you before.
Yeah,
He
it's a
has to
classic Brighton. Yeah, it's
exactly,
a classic comment from him.
exactly. So yeah, I think I'm good on scene one.
Okay, can you take us to the office?
Sure. So we're now in Maxwell's office, and Maggie comes in and she wants to go to a party. And Maxwell doesn't want her to go. And she says something like, "Give me one good reason." And he says, "I'll give you 16. 8 boys and their grubby little hands." To which, at the end of this conversation, Maggie says, "Fine, I won't have a life. I'll end up old and alone like Fran," which, of course, the timing on the show is amazing. It's something that the show is known for. Fran walks in just in time to hear that Maggie's worried about ending up old and alone like Fran. And so Fran makes a couple of jokes about she couldn't find her poly grip. She doesn't have her miracle ear. She can't hear. Anyway, so we get more details on this party, that it's a makeout party. And Fran immediately corrects herself. "Did I say make out? I meant makeup. Makeover, Avon, Mary Kay, maybe Tupperware there. No kissing, just burping." And
Hmm.
Maxwell is not okay with it. Because, I mean, the thing is, there's an attendance list. And of course, Fran said she knows most of the kids. But as Maxwell points out, they're paired off two by two. It's like Noah's Ark.
Hmm.
Well, anyway, so Maxwell proclaims that Maggie's too young to go to a kissing party because she's 14 years old. And Maggie objects, saying, "You never let me go anywhere." Maxwell tells her, "Not true. Go to your room." Well, anyway, I'm sure you're going to comment on this, but, Maxwell makes a comment about how he's not going to let his daughter go to a party with a bunch of lecherous young men. And Fran says something about, "You wouldn't happen to have the address, would you?"
Hmm.
I figured that was going to be something you'd want to talk about. Do you want to talk about that now? Or,
Oh, we can finish the
okay.
the summary of the scene.
So Niles walks in with the resumes and headshots of the showgirls that Maxwell wanted. And he's like, "The auditions are later today. These should have been here hours ago." And Niles replies, "They were." And he gives a list of the showgirls that Maxwell, Cece, and Fran's just still sort of there. But really, Maxwell and Cece should pay particular attention to. And they look at one, and Cece says, "Big hair, tight pants, red lips," to which Fran says, "Tramp," which is funny because that's exactly what Fran looks like today. She's wearing these tight pants, has her big hair, and bright red lips.
Yep.
So Cece complains that they're all tall, leggy, buxom. And Maxwell says, "But well, something about we ordered short, dumpy showgirls," kind of sarcastically. And then Fran, of course, starts to go into a story about her relatives, and she's told, "Tell me about the one that ends with the plumbing getting fixed. I'd like to shower and shave before these auditions." So anyway, I think that's pretty much it for the scene. Did I miss anything?
I did want to note, I think Cece makes a comment about Maxwell's appearance, how he's
Yes.
scruffy, common, brutish.
Yes. Because of his facial hair that you mentioned previously. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good catch.
Yeah, apparently he has to shave daily
God
to
bless
keep
him.
the clean cut look. Um, but yeah, and I think we'll talk more about that comment later.
Okay.
We can just keep going if that's okay with you.
That works for me. I just, as soon as I heard that line, I was like, Bernadette's going to have comments on that. That's why I
Yeah.
noted it. Otherwise, I would have just let it pass and continued on.
Well, I mean, there's going to be other things I want to comment on that's kind of related to it.
Oh, okay. Do you want to talk to us about scene 3 then?
Yes. So there's Fran goes to the door and she opens it up expecting to see her cousin Irving. Instead, there's a young teenage girl who we find out is Tiffany, another relative, and actually cousin Irving's granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of breezes in, and of course Fran's like, I was expecting, cousin Irving. And she's like, oh yeah, he's on his way. And he's older. He actually eventually comes through the door very slowly, because Fran was like, I was expecting you at 9:30. And they were there. It's just it took forever for Irving to make it to up the stairs.
Right.
But of course, one of Irving's first comments to Fran is, Fran, you got old. Where
exactly.
Which is funny because again, when Tiffany first arrives and introduces herself as Tiffany, Fran's kind of in disbelief, like, no, Tiffany's still in diapers or whatever.
Pampers, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so apparently it's been a long time since they've all seen each other. Um, Tiffany is just very like at home right away. Like she just seems to have a carefree attitude in some respects. She's kind of playing around with the statue on the little circular table, and the entryway. And Fran's like, don't touch that. You break it, you buy it. Meanwhile, Irving's kind of still slowly making his way around. And Fran's wondering, oh, is Irving babysitting Tiffany? And Tiffany's like, no, it's actually the opposite. Because Irving now has a tendency to just drive until the gas tank's out.
Yep.
And so someone calls the number on the van, and Fran wonders about that, but Tiffany is like, oh, well, we don't know much about it because it's not even our number, because Irving had wrecked his van.
Yep.
So obviously, yeah, he's old. Has some problems.
Yes.
But in the meantime, Niles and Brighton are coming in from the doorway that would generally lead to the kitchen and the office. And Niles is explaining to Brighton that no, he can't be at the keyhole later when, the auditions are going on, because that's where I'll be.
Exactly.
Says Niles. So Fran introduces Brighton to Tiffany and, wants them to play together, get along. Tiffany and Brighton start having a back and forth where it's apparent that they have opposite tastes in like teams and different stuff. Yeah. And so, Brighton calls her a geek and she calls him a dork, and they're heading upstairs.
Right.
And that's most of it. Is there anything I'm missing that you wanted to discuss from that scene?
No, you covered every point I had in my notes.
Nice.
I like when we think alike, but I also like when we don't.
Yeah.
I can take the next scene if you want.
Yep, go for it.
So we're now in the kitchen, and we come in and we see that Irving is under the sink, and he says, "Uh-oh." And Fran says, "What's with the uh-oh? I don't like to hear plumbers or hairdressers say uh-oh." And he says, "I forgot my wrench." Well, what were you doing down there all this time? That's my business, he responds. And anyway, so it's clearly not going so great. And Fran asks, kind of Niles, why do I have this compulsion to hire my relatives? And he says it's a sickness. And so she concludes that she could go to Uncle Stanley, the shrink.
Yep.
And so I think Fran's making snacks at the time, and then Brighton and Tiffany come in, and they're arguing about whether there were two Darrens. And I don't want to step too much on our notable New Yorkers, but they're referring to Bewitched. And the answer is yes. Fran says, yes, there were two Darrens. And she gives a little bit of detail about the two actors. And so Tiffany says to pay up. And Brighton basically indicates he's not going to pay. And she says, you welch on me. It's the last thing you'll ever do. And he says, oh, so sue me. And so Fran and Tiffany come up with yet another relative who they can use to, was it cousin Sydney? I think?
Uncle Sydney.
So anyway, so they kind of leave, and I think, and Maggie comes in, and she's complaining that even the troll has a social life. And she starts, complaining to Fran about how it's just a party, it's dad's not fair, like the typical teenage complaints. And Fran's responding to each one saying, I know. Hey, I know a lot. I should get a raise. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add to that scene?
No, just, did you say the phrase, even the troll has a social life?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. So, obviously Maggie is not pleased with the situation.
No.
But then we cut to the living room, and
Gracie.
Did
you catch the music? Did you catch the music that's playing in the intro into scene 5?
I can't say that I noted it.
So it was sort of a trick question, because one of the other times we heard a few stanzas of this song in the episode where Gracie was on the stage, and it's Give My Regards to Broadway again.
Okay.
So,
which
anyway.
Makes sense, because we cut to the living room, and Gracie, who we haven't seen too much of in this particular episode, is wandering around wide-eyed at all the showgirls who are all across the living room getting warmed up for the auditions. Brighton and Tiffany also are there at some point, and one of the girls who's auditioning asks, Brighton kind of sidles up, mentions that he's the son of the producer, and she's like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he's kind of pointedly looking at her chest area, and says a halter top.
Yeah. And then Tiffany dragged him away appropriately.
Yes. Yep. And meanwhile, Gracie's kind of noting they're like giant Barbie dolls. And then Fran, of course, is like, these toys are for boys.
Yeah. No,
so
Gracie said, look, Fran, giant Barbie dolls. And turns to one of them, will you play with me? And then Fran says, no, honey, these toys are for boys.
Yeah. Yep. So, the living room, it's just kind of setting the scene essentially for, that it's audition time.
Yep.
So I don't know if you want to go ahead and take the scene in the office, or if you're wanting me to continue. Either way, I'm good. You can take us to the office though, if you want.
Okay, I'll do the office, and then I'll let you do what I listed as the next two. But
okay.
So we come into the office, and we see Gigi's audition, and she's explaining her credentials and that she can do a full split, and she jumps down and does a full split, which is very impressive. I can't do a full split. Can you do a full split?
No.
So anyway, she gets the job, and she's so excited to be working for Mr. Sheffield. And of course, Niles is in there, and after Gigi says, oh, thank you so much, whatever, Niles says, oh God, I want your job. And so Fran comes in, and Niles and Maxwell are, how do I put this politely? They're kind of like leaning against the desk, and they're sort of dazed. And Fran says, wow, look at the two of you, like a couple of cats outside the fish store. I would have thought you'd be more sophisticated than that. And they're like, No, because they're still, dazed.
Mhm.
And Maxwell tries to explain that the human body is a beautiful thing. At some point in this conversation, Cece mentions that I wanted to do 12 angry, don't look at me, I want to do 12 angry men, to which Niles can't help himself from saying, but they didn't want to do you.
Mhm.
So the reason Fran came in is because she's there to try to press Maggie's case for her. And
Mhm.
she argues, it's just a party. To which Maxwell points out, amazingly enough, that cogent argument still hasn't convinced me. So Fran's like, okay, well, give me a minute. Can I think of it as a definite maybe? She's trying to negotiate. Anyway, Fran says, Fran's told to tell Irving to hurry it up, otherwise you'll be finished before he is. To which Fran says, do you want it fast or do you want it good? And Maxwell replies, I want it all. And
Mhm.
Fran gets a smile on her face. The scruffy look is cute on you. It's very cute on you.
Mhm.
And Niles had, of course, by this point left to go, dust something in the living room. And Niles demands, Maxwell demands an aspirin. And Niles says, sorry, sir, my hands are full, because he doesn't want to leave the living room. So,
Mhm. Yeah. And I don't have anything to add to that. So if you're okay, we can move into the living room
go for it.
where Niles is dusting the air. He has like one of those
Correct.
classic kind of feather dusters, and he's just kind of looking around, dusting the air. Fran's obviously trying to find Irving. Um, and so she eventually makes her way upstairs.
Did you catch what Niles told her? Where about Irving?
I did not.
So
I don't have it written down. So if you
Fran
have it
asks,
verbatim.
where Irving is, like if Niles has seen Irving, and I don't have it verbatim, but Niles made the point that last he saw him, he was bounding up the stairs. If you leave now, you'll be able to catch him at the landing.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, Fran goes upstairs.
She did not
And
catch him on the landing.
she did not. And so she goes into the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
which is a huge bathroom, by the
We
way.
see that bathroom again, so multiple times. Not
It's
just
also
in this
very
episode.
colorful, patterned. Anyway, so she goes into the bathroom and she opens
she pulls back the shower curtain.
Yep, to see Tiffany and Brighton making out in the bathtub.
Yep.
And of course she's like freaking out, pulls them out, and they go into the little alcove upstairs.
Before they go into the alcove, did you catch what Tiffany said?
You told me to. Well,
before that,
Fran chastises, huh?
Before that. So as soon as Fran pulls the shower curtain back, Tiffany says, how about a little privacy here?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was such an interesting thing. Like, that would first off, I would not be in that situation. But second, if I was, like, that would not have been my response. I would have been embarrassed, not demanding more privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Fran chastises her like, I told you not to touch anything. And then, Tiffany points out, but you did tell me to like play nice.
Yep.
So they're out in the alcove. There's the Tiffany and Brighton are sitting on like there's a little window kind of seat.
Yep.
And again, Fran's just kind of appalled, at the situation. And Tiffany's like, oh, don't tell me you haven't thought about kissing, his old man.
Yeah. So Fran asks him, how did this happen? And Brighton says, she hit me, then I pushed her. One thing led to another. You know how it is. And he puts his arm around her. And Tiffany says, the kid's cute, so I kissed him. Go ahead. Tell me you haven't had the same thoughts about his old man.
Mm-hmm. And then at one point, too, Tiffany mentions how good Brighton is at kissing. And then they start making out again as soon as like Fran's back is turned. And so like, of course, Fran comes flying back in to separate them. And eventually Fran basically is like telling Tiffany if she wants to light a fire, she needs to light a fire under her grandfather's butt. So essentially trying to split the two of them because she sends Brighton to his room and she stops Tiffany from following him.
Right.
And instead sends her to find her grandfather.
Right.
But Fran's very concerned about this, because he, um, because of how Maxwell has, reacted to Maggie before, and especially, when Maggie kissed Eddie in the first episode. And so she's concerned about the position she feels like Brighton has put her in. So that's kind of her worry with that.
Right. Before we jump into the kitchen, I just want to share a couple what I thought were funny quotes from the hallway scene. So, as you pointed out, Tiffany and Brighton basically jump on each other again. And Fran separates them and says, "You guys need to be hosed down. If only we had water." So I like that. And then the line you referenced was, she says to Tiffany, "You want to get somebody hot, go light a fire under your grandfather's butt." So those are the two things I wanted to add. Shall we jump to the kitchen?
Yep.
So as you said, Fran is really concerned. As she says to Niles, "Mr. Sheffield is going to kill me. He's going to find some way to make this my fault, just because the plumber is my cousin and he brought her and I sent them up to play together." And Niles makes a comment, "Oh, the twisted pathways of his mind."
Yeah, I kind of chuckled at that.
Yeah. And then, he's the one who points out to Fran, "You spent so much time up this creek. I should have thought by now you'd have bought a paddle." And so as they're talking, Gracie comes in and she makes another appearance and she announces the kiss. And, Maxwell comes in and he wants to talk. He's concerned or upset about something. And Fran starts saying, "I did send them up to play with each other. Who knew they'd take it literally?" And Maxwell's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You first," which on her part, good plan. So he's still upset about the lack of water, and Fran's totally relieved and laughing. And she's like, "Oh, you're upset about the water." And turns to Niles, "He's upset about the water." Like, and he's like, "This is no laughing matter. I'm about to fire your cousin." And Gracie says about Fran, she thought she was in trouble about Brighton. "What do you mean about Brighton?" And Gracie just gets this look. She like pales and says, "Gotta go, got a play date, bye," and runs out. And so Maxwell rightly turns to Fran and wants to know what's going on. And she says, "I found Brighton in the shower. He had water. He had Tiffany." "What? Brighton kissing your cousin?" "Oh, she's just a distant cousin. Very distant. In fact, more like a close neighbor. Not so close. There was a fence." And Maxwell starts, thinking, so Brighton snagged his first kiss and only 11 years old. Fran's sort of surprised that Maxwell sounded proud. And, "Oh, you're right. It was 2 years. Oh, I apologize. I totally wrote that down wrong." Because I have in my later notes where I'm reading from now, he beat his old man by 2 years. Sorry, I was wrong.
It's all good.
And anyway, so Fran starts, talking, and Niles tells her now would be a good time to stop talking, and she says, "You never think of that as an option." It's accurate.
Yeah. And earlier too, when Maxwell is threatening to fire Irving, Fran's so relieved. She's like, "Fire away."
Right, exactly. It's not her butt on the line.
Yeah. So I did want to, I guess, just briefly before we move on, just because the scene had a lot of different ages in it. Like earlier, Fran's saying, "Well, Brighton's 3 years younger than Maggie. So if, Maxwell responded this way to Maggie, it's going to be worse since Brighton's 3 years younger."
Right.
And I just want to quickly point out that I believe in Maggie the model, they said she was now 15, but now that she's back to age 14 in the show. Did you pick that up?
See, that's an interesting point. I think you're right. They do say that because when Carlo, I think his name is, he's the creepy photographer
Who gyrates. Yeah.
Yes, the creepy gyrating photographer. Thank you for agreeing with me that he was creepy and knowing what I'm talking about. I think you're right that she says that says to him, "Stop it, Carlo. Quit it, Carlo. She's only 15." You're
Mm-hmm.
right. I think you're right.
But anyway,
Um,
that was just kind of a continuity error that I noticed.
yeah.
Um,
So the thing with the kids' ages, sometimes I think you're right that sometimes they don't keep it totally correct. So
mhm. Yeah. But yeah, so I didn't really have anything else though to add to that.
do you want to jump
Uh,
to the bathroom?
yes. Um,
Our second visit
so
to the bathroom in this episode.
yes. So cousin Irving is up there with Maxwell. And again, Maxwell's wanting to know when the water is done and all that. And Irving's like, oh, the bathroom's ready to go. And so Maxwell's like, oh, does that mean you can take a shower? You know, and Irving's like, well, if it's you and me, that's extra. I was
Yep.
just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Uh, But yeah, so we're that's just a really quick thing to establish that the water is now working upstairs. If unless you have anything to add, I can move down to the living room unless
Go
you want
for
to
it.
talk about the living room.
No, go for it. You literally summarized everything I noted.
Yeah,
So
so we're back down in the living room. Fran's trying to tidy up the living room in the wake of the auditions. And Maggie comes in and says, you know, Brighton kissed or was making out in the shower. And Fran's kind of like, ah, slow news day. And
yeah.
then, you know, obviously Maggie is irritated by this. Fran's still, you know, cleaning up. So she picks up a bra and goes, um, is this yours? And Maggie's kind of like, no, it's Gracie's, you know,
Yeah.
so kind of sarcastically. Maggie is still wanting to know, like, you know, what's the status with the party? And Fran's kind of explaining to her, like, men are like chicken. If you push them too soon, they get tough. If you let them simmer, they fall apart in your hands. But then Maggie points out the party is tonight. And so, you know, Fran's like, oh, you know, uh,
Kiss it off.
but yeah, because Fran says to Maggie, I've been skating on thin ice all day with your father. Please don't push me through it.
Mm-hmm.
And Maggie's kind of like, well, aren't you the one who has said that men and women should be treated equally? And Fran's like, maybe. And then Maggie continues, but men should still continue to open doors and pick up the check. And Fran's like, yeah, that's me.
Yep.
um, so essentially, Fran's like, okay, you know, I'll go talk to your dad again
I'll
regarding the
go poke.
party.
She says, I'll go poke
But
the
yeah,
chicken.
poke the chicken. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Was there anything else in that scene?
No, I mean, the lines you were referencing are men can't be rushed. They're like chickens. If you cook them too fast, they get tough. Whereas if you take your time, let them simmer, they fall apart in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So do you want to take us back
am
to
I
the
going
bathroom?
upstairs? So
Yes.
we visit the bathroom a third time today. And again, keep in mind, this entire episode happened in one day.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Fran is trying to figure out. So she goes upstairs and she sees she goes into the bathroom. And she sees the curtain pulled, and she thinks she's going to find Brighton and Tiffany again. She's already annoyed. She pulls it back, and it's Mr. Sheffield naked, and he's horrified and embarrassed, and she's horrified. And the only thing she can manage to say to him is, "Oh, look, you're wearing the new soap on the rope I got you for Christmas." And she like runs out. I'm gonna take the hallway too, if that's okay.
Yep. Yep.
And so she's like run out of the bathroom, and she's clearly shell shocked. And Niles is there. What is it? And she's like, she like can't get a word out. And he's like, don't make me slap you. And she's just like, I just saw Mr. Sheffield naked. It was horrible. And Niles interjects, yes, I keep telling him to get to the gym. And Francis, I'm serious. It's like seeing your father naked. My mother should be so lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to make her feel better, Niles tells her an anecdote about how when he first started in service, he walked in on the Queen Mum in the shower on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so Niles can't really get Fran to calm down or, relax or whatever. He does ask her if she wants a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
But his one request is, and I quote, "Let me tell Miss Babcock." So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Fran also mentions Maxwell's bulging muscles.
yes, I don't care. He's not strong enough. I don't care how many bulging muscles he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I might have flipped that line, but same difference. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't have anything really to add to that. So if you're okay, I'll take us to the living room.
Yeah, I'm totally fine. Go for it.
So basically Tiffany and Irving are about to leave. Tiffany wants to make it home before Letterman. Brighton is, I think, does he attempt to like hug her or something? I'm trying to remember. But basically Tiffany's like, don't, you're suffocating me.
Don't cling, you're suffocating me. And his response is,
cling.
We just met. And she says, well, it was what it was. It was good. What did she say? It was good. It was what it was. Now it's done or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. So, they leave and Brighton kind of asks Maxwell, like, I know this is new, but was I dumped? And
Yep.
I'm sure you have this verbatim.
I do.
What Maxwell says. So can you please say it verbatim?
I love that you're sure that I have it, because I do.
Yes.
Welcome to the battle of the sexes, where they sneak up on you when you're most vulnerable, utterly humiliate you, and leave you trembling, exposed, and naked.
Mm-hmm. And he's obviously, very clearly thinking about the shower incident that has occurred recently with Fran.
Which Brighton doesn't know about. Part one, part two. Did you catch what Brighton asks next?
Yes. Well, I don't have it verbatim, but he asks, if it counts as him, like, did he get to first base?
Correct.
And Maxwell kind of was like, yeah. And then so Brighton's excited and starts running up the stairs.
Correct. So despite the battle of the sexes description Maxwell provided, all Brighton can focus on is that he made it to first base.
Yes. Yep. And then Fran starts coming in, though.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell quickly goes out the front door.
Yep.
But he's like kind of in that little entryway between like the actual exterior door and the front door that we know of.
Right.
And but Fran goes immediately to it and opens the door. And Maxwell is very like averting his eyes. He immediately goes to his office. Fran's trying to talk to him. He's obviously trying to avoid her.
Yep.
And of course, Fran keeps saying, various things that allude to the thing, by accident. She just wants to talk about the bare facts. And it's no big thing. And of course, she catches herself afterwards for each one. And then she's like, let me just cut to the chase. And she pauses and she's like, okay, yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Cut to the chase. There's no like other meaning to that. And, she points out, well, you're the one who said the human body's a beautiful thing. And he's like, oh, no, there's like a big difference between the auditions and what happened. And she's like, yeah, I'm not selling tickets.
Correct.
Yeah.
And plenty of women would pay through the nose.
Yeah. And she's like, don't worry, I didn't see anything except your double standards.
Yeah.
So that starts the conversation like, hey, Maxwell's so happy about Brighton, but what about Maggie? And Maxwell says, it's not that he doesn't trust Maggie, it's that he doesn't trust the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, well, I mean, but she needs to kind of learn how to handle that because, eventually those boys are going to turn into men. But if you really think about it, men are kind of like 14-year-old boys. Yep. And Maxwell's like, you make a very good point. How annoying. So he ultimately says, okay, she can go to the party, but she needs to be home by 10 p.m. Fran starts to protest, but then quickly kind of backs off. And it's like, oh, yes, that's the perfect time to have some fun, but not too much fun. And then, as you mentioned in your summary, as she's leaving, she's like, because still she points out that Maxwell won't look her in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. Believe me.
Yep. Yep. So I'm just going to add a little bit more color to what you said. After she comments on, I didn't see anything other except your double standard, he says, I beg your pardon, or something like that. And she points out that he's one set of rules for boys and a whole repressed Rapunzel thing for the girls. And she's like, look, all I'm saying is that you need to trust Maggie as much as Brighton, and knowing Brighton even more so. To which then, as you pointed out, he said, I trust Maggie. It's the boys I don't trust. Well, Maggie has to learn to handle 14-year-old boys, so when she grows up, she can know how to handle full-grown men who, when you think about it, are a lot like 14-year-old boys. And then, as you pointed out, she sort of asks Maxwell, are you ever going to look me in the eye again? And he's like, I am looking you in the eye. And then he's like, you have to understand, like, this is very embarrassing for me. And that's when she told him that he had nothing to be embarrassed about. Believe me. Which, of course, her tone, I think, is so important there. The way she says it. Because, like, if she had just said, you've nothing to be embarrassed about, believe me. Like, that would have been one thing. Exactly. But believe me, like, the way she says it, it's, anyway, I'm not doing it justice, I don't think. But, yeah, so you can tell that.
I think they get the point.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add to that scene?
Nope.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I mean, basically for the credits this time, we get our first bloopers, I think, as like the closing scene. And it's essentially that scene with Fran and Maggie, where Fran's trying to explain how men are like chickens. And she keeps messing up the lines, and that's it. So that's the episode.
All right. Before we jump into our shticks, is there anything you want to talk about, or do you want to talk about things within the shticks?
Let's go shticks, and then if there's anything I can't fit in the shticks, then I'll wrap it up then, if that's okay with you.
Okay. Where would you like to start?
Oh, do you want to just go ahead and do fashion? Because there's not much to discuss because it's the same day.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's the natural one to start with, because you've already flagged the fact that Fran was not in a bathrobe at breakfast.
Yeah. Shocker.
Yeah, exactly. Like, of all the times to show up to breakfast in a bathrobe, the day that you cannot wash your face, brush your teeth, flush a toilet, like, that's the day to wear a bathrobe.
Yeah. So Fran throughout the episode is wearing like the red plaid vest with the white frilly top, like the long sleeve top, and then black pants. And again, I'm pretty sure we've seen these pieces of clothing before.
Yeah. So my question was, my comment was, I didn't really care for her outfit, but every time she wears something like that, I wonder, again, if she's wearing black pants or leggings. Like, was she so far ahead of the curve that she knew leggings were going to be super cool, 15 years later?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look back to see, but I can't tell for sure. But it, like you mentioned before, the whole comment about big hair, tight pants, and red lips really does, describe Fran.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, in terms of just fashion in general, in this episode, I think kind of tying into 90s nostalgia is what all the showgirls who are auditioning are wearing. They're wearing their really high cut, like leotards and stuff. And I'm like, that's so 90s / 80s.
I was going to say, I think it's more 80s, but it's the same point. It's nostalgic.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of Maggie's outfit in this episode.
She was wearing a white shirt and like a long skirt, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it, kind of holy. Or like, it
was sort of matronly, I think.
Well, I mean, there were like, yeah, it's hard to describe, but
it's not flattering.
A huge fan. Yeah.
We can agree on that.
Yeah.
The only Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say the only outfit I actually really liked in this episode was Gracie's black and white dress or frock, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the
Yeah.
only outfit I liked.
Yeah. Yeah, this episode was not really full of fashion. As yeah, so unless you have anything to add, we can move on.
Yeah, no, I agree with your analysis. And as I said, the only thing I liked was Gracie's dress. So I guess
Okay.
90s nostalgia. You've already mentioned
Yes.
the high cut leotards. I'm going to mention the old cars.
Yes.
I already referenced earlier one other thing, but if you have something else you want to add before.
Why don't you go ahead and remind me what you referenced before?
So in the first scene, Niles, actually, I realized there are two things. Niles references, says that he beeped the plumber, but his yacht had gone into international waters. So beepers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So those for our much younger viewers, beepers were the mobile communication technology that was popular before cell phones. And you'd basically get beeped, and I never had a beeper. But my understanding is like you would get beeped and it would tell you the phone number to call. So then you'd have to go find a phone and make a call to find out what your message was.
Yeah. And so I know like people had different like codes and stuff. You know how like when we were younger and sometimes we'd on like a calculator try to put in certain like hell or hello.
Right.
Stuff like that. But yeah, now another thing I noted that also somewhat ties into notable New Yorkers is the fact that Tiffany wants to make it home before Letterman.
Yep.
So, I mean, Letterman, like that was on for decades. But he's no longer on the air. So again, that's a bit nostalgic. When he was back on. And again, just the whole concept of like you had to watch TV like when the show was on. There was no like, really recording or streaming kind of
definitely no streaming. So in the breakfast scene, Maxwell asks Niles if he looked for any other plumbers, and Niles makes the comment that he was looking through I was looking through the yellow pages for origami supplies. So the yellow pages. I don't know if they still print physical yellow pages anymore. I mean, I think in some areas there are, yellow pages or white pages that are still printed up, but I feel like that's something that most young folks, so people younger than us, might not know what that is. And for them, it's a phone book.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Go ahead.
And I definitely remember when I was younger and we would have the phone books, and sometimes we'd stack them on a chair to help us like be higher,
right?
Sit higher up and stuff. So, now I do have a question because as you mentioned, when Fran catches Maxwell in the shower naked, he does have a soap on a rope around his neck.
Yep.
Like, I don't think that's too common. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but do you think that's more of a nostalgic thing? Or do you still think it's around? I don't know.
I'm sure there are now artisanal soap on ropes that are sold that you can find online. I'm sure of that. For our delightful listeners, I have not Googled, I have not looked, but I'm still fairly certain. I guess I didn't think of it as a nostalgic thing. I just thought of it more as like a interesting thing to give him for Christmas.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything else nostalgic?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to jump to notable New Yorkers, Yiddish cop?
Yes.
I guess those are only two options.
Yes.
I'll just do Yiddish cop because I only had one. If you caught something that I missed, please tell me. The only thing I thought worth noting is Israeli bonds, which are really ways to their friend makes the comment that she could have had the body of one of the showgirls if she'd cashed in her Israeli bond. and Israeli bonds are gifts that I don't know if they're still as popular, but for many years it was a popular gift to give someone when they had give a baby or a child, because it was money invested in the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. So, notable New Yorkers.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you want to start?
Sure. I'll start with a couple of the ones that I sort of mentioned when we were talking through the different scenes. So there's a reference to Noah's Ark, which is a Bible story about the Great Flood, in which Noah and his family built this ark and took 2 of each animal onto the ark to save them from flooding. And this will tie to the Yiddish Kop thing. I recently read something explaining that up until the time of the Great Flood in the ark, all of the creatures on Earth were vegetarians. So, I mean,
interesting.
That obviously assumes that you believe in scriptures of some kind. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to give another one, or should I keep going through the ones that I listed previously?
You can list.
Okay, so already mentioned the 2 Darrens, and Fran said the first one died. The second one just came out of the closet. Go live with a witch. This was referencing Bewitched, which was a show about Samantha Stevens, who was a witch, and her mortal husband, and all of the shenanigans she got into trying to hide the fact that she was a witch from the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
There was the reference to 12 Angry Men, which is a play about a jury's deliberation. My high school did it, but we renamed it 12 Angry Jurors, so we could have jurors of multiple sexes. And you already mentioned Letterman, so.
Yeah. I also, Tiffany called Brighton Richie Rich.
Yep.
So again, there's that movie Richie Rich.
It's
you mentioned
Richie Rich is a 1994 family comedy starring Macaulay Culkin and others. It's about the world's richest boy whose only friend is his loyal butler. At least that is according to Wikipedia.
And you already mentioned too, like the various like Avon, Mary Kay, Tupperware, that Fran kind of throws out there when she says it's not a make out party, it's a make party.
Right.
Let's see here. Barbie dolls. That's pretty obvious. Now, I don't know if this is a reference that I just couldn't quite catch in time. But whenever it's the scene in the kitchen where Fran's worried about getting in trouble because of Brighton, and Gracie comes in and announces, oh yeah, Brighton was, kissing Tiffany in the shower. And there was something about a hopper.
Hedda Hopper.
Okay. I missed like the first part of that.
According to Wikipedia, Hedda Hopper was an American gossip columnist and actress. She was most popular in the 1940s. She was a supporter of the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings, and she supported the Hollywood blacklist for suspected communists.
Ah, okay.
So interesting. I thought that was an interesting reference point for a show in the 1990s.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was obviously, in the context, Fran's just like, everybody, they're gonna unveil the secret. Because back then too, like, Now's one thing was like, oh, well, why don't you not tell him? And Fran points out, no, it's gonna get out
Exactly.
Later. So let's see here. I don't think I really had anything else. Did you?
I did. So in I think it's the first scene in The Office, Fran tells a story about her cousin, one of her relatives who wanted to be a Rockette. And she makes a comment about how the relative, the height wasn't the problem, it was the width. Not a great comment, but the Rockettes are a famous dance team in New York City, for lack of better phrasing. They have I understand they have very strict height and weight requirements because they want all of their dancers to be approximately the same size.
And then I did realize that you mentioned before to the Rapunzel reference whenever Fran's talking about the double standards.
Right. There's also Gigi, when she's doing her audition, she mentions that she studied under Stella Adler. Stella Adler was an American actress and acting teacher who founded the Stella Adler School of Acting in New York City back in 1949. It is also from Wikipedia.
Nice.
Yeah, Wikipedia is very helpful in putting together our notes. Those, I think, were the only other ones I caught.
I randomly thought, like, back when I was in college, one of my professors was like, don't use Wikipedia, it's from the devil. But everybody uses it all the time, like everyday stuff. And obviously academic papers are different.
Well, so actually, a number of years ago, my dad told me about a study that found that Wikipedia was more accurate than more established encyclopedias, because there were so many people visiting the site and correcting things. So like corrections were made much faster. I do not have the citation for that study. I just remember my dad telling me about it.
Okay. Before we move into future fun, though, in general, I just wanted to discuss, there's just like a lot of sexualization throughout this episode.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had it before, like Brighton's character's kind of been established that he's kind of like one to, again, want to look through keyholes and wants to be a halter top and all that kind of stuff.
And
I just think,
if you recall in the first episode, when they go to the bridal shop, he's hanging out under the skirt of a mannequin asking, are these dummies anatomically correct?
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that, so it's established he's 11.
Right.
And like, so if you put that in context, then what? He's like in 5th grade or 6th grade?
6th grade, yeah.
Like sometimes I feel like his characterization would be more in line with like a 12 or 13-year-old, but who am I to say?
I agree with, obviously you and I don't have kids, so we can't say for certain, but yeah, I also have that same perception.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting throughout. And then obviously there's the big point, of Maxwell and Niles kind of drooling over these women who have come in. But it's an interesting juxtaposition on how embarrassed Maxwell is to have been caught in the shower naked, which again highlights the whole double standard present in this particular episode. But yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Did you find it like
I knew you were gonna comment on that. I'm not gonna say I like it. I just no, I
not to put you on the spot.
No,
it was just like whether or not that was
I don't mean to be put on the spot, but I'm also looking. I also have pulled up our rating spreadsheet, and I'm looking at how I've rated other episodes, and I'm comparing in my mind how I like this one versus other ones that I've ranked somewhat higher than I thought I had. And so by comparison, I think I'm going to rate this higher than you are.
Yes, probably.
Not to jump the gun on that point, but that's what I'm thinking, that I'm looking at other episodes that I gave higher rankings than I thought I should, that now looking back, I should have.
Yeah, that's why from the get-go, I have made the disclaimer that ratings are subject to change in retrospect, if necessary. Because it's kind of hard. Also because, depending on the episode, there might be various aspects you like better than in others.
I will say, I absolutely agree with your point that, the sexualization of different characters is sort of uncomfortable. But also, we are looking at it from the lens of 2021, right?
Yeah.
After the Me Too movement took off, so society is different now. Or at least we hope society is different now, right? it's very hard for me to, because I've seen the show so many times, it's very hard to divorce the like comfort factor, the fact that like when I watched it when I was younger, I've watched it throughout my adulthood. Like it just is what it is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very
Yeah.
hard to divorce the like comfort I draw from rewatching The Nanny.
Yeah. You love it, faults and all,
Yeah,
warts and all.
exactly. Please don't send us hate mail.
I mean, there's, I think, several examples that anybody could go through in terms of various media, literature, whatever they consumed that they loved growing up, that looking back, you can maybe see problematic aspects, but you still really enjoy that particular um, piece of media. So, but yeah.
So
Anyway,
future fun.
do you have any? Yeah, go ahead. Future fun.
So there's a reference to Uncle Stanley, who we learned in this episode is a shrink, a therapist of some kind. We will meet Uncle Stanley on a number of occasions, including in 2 different 2-part episodes. Towards the end of the series, he is played by Fran Drescher's real life dad, which I think is a point I've made before, but I'll make it again. So that's point 1. Point 2. This is, I think, the first instance we see of Fran really getting involved in Maxwell's life and it not quite going according to plan. That is a recurring theme. We will see that again. And the stakes vary depending on the circumstances. That's all I'll say. And then finally, the actress who plays Tiffany in this episode comes back later in the series and plays Francine. She plays a character named Francine in the episode The Bird's Nest.
Interesting.
It is, I'm sure you're curious. I'm sure our wonderful listeners are curious. It is not Fran when she was younger.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a fun quinky dink that her character is. I mean, it's an intentional quinky dink by the authors, but if you're just like watching it, it's just a fun coincidence that her name is Francine.
Gotcha.
So those are the things I thought of for future fun. I guess it's time for our episode rating. And I think it's your turn to go first.
Yes, it's my
thank
turn.
God. Okay. I like it when it's your turn to go first.
I've been kind of struggling with the rating because overall, again, it wasn't my favorite. There were certain things that were a little fun. I mean, it's just kind of funny her walking out on him and the whole awkward exchange after, but I don't know, because I'm still, if you can't tell, I'm still like not quite sure what to give it. I'll just go with the 2.5.
Okay. I'm duly recording your rating.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay.
And that is, as I mentioned, largely influenced by the fact that I'm staring at our episode rating spreadsheet and I see some of the other episodes that I've rated 4, and I think I like this episode way more than those other episodes. You're right. This episode is not without its flaws. It does have many flaws. I really do enjoy all the different things. Like, I don't want to say I enjoy all the different things that are going on, but I like how the different stories weave into each other. Like, there's Maggie trying to go to a party and Maxwell saying no, but then Brighton kisses Tiffany because the water's out, which is how we started the episode. And then when Maxwell finds out about Brighton and Tiffany, that is what ultimately leads him to allow Maggie to go to the party. Meanwhile, Fran and Maxwell have this, interaction that he's scarred and horrified, and she's also somewhat scarred and horrified. I like their interaction. I particularly like Fran's, sort of overdone, but I mean, it's intentionally overdone facial expression when she walks in on him. And, I was, as you were talking, I think part of the reason why also this
wasn't one of my top is just like, episodes. It's like just like Maggie's attitude towards Fran in this, like behind her back saying, I don't want to end up old and alone like Fran. And then really pushing Fran to convince Maxwell, even though Fran like out and out says, I've been skating on thin ice all day. Like, please don't push me through it. So I don't know. I think that's partly why as well. I mean, I think it's necessary. Point. I think it's necessary, obviously, to point out the double standard. Like, I agree with that. But it's just like how it seems to me Maggie's very quick to turn on Fran, as we've seen the last couple of episodes.
Well, Maggie is a teenager. And
yeah,
I mean,
maybe this is like the whole like Harry Potter, in the 5th book, how he's an angsty, angsty guy. But yeah.
So I feel like I should point out, and just another little piece of future fun, like Maggie often goes to Fran to work on her father, right? Mm-hmm. To get her way. She goes through Fran. Because she knows she's not able to get what she wants on her own. And that actually leads to some issues, later on. I think Fran makes a joke about how why are children like a brassiere, because they lift and separate or something. Mm-hmm. So she makes comments about how, I mean, there are issues later on where Maggie wants something and puts Fran in the way of her father, I guess, or uses Fran to get her way. That's just sort of what she does as a teenager. Yeah. I mean, also to your point about how you don't like that Maggie's sort of using Fran as like a don't let this happen to me circumstance. There is a later episode where there's a flashback to when Fran and Val were teenagers, and they make a reference to Fran's cousin, who was, how they were never going to end up like her, and the cousin was, over 30 and single and, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly where Fran is at this point. Yeah. Yeah. I particularly enjoy as I said, I particularly enjoy the interaction of the different storylines. I like things that push Fran and Maxwell together. Even if they're, it's only incremental, and yeah. Not great that Maxwell's embarrassed, but he does, spoiler, he does recover. He does move on. As far as I can tell, he doesn't require any, assistance to do so. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 15, Deep Throat.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.